This is the audio for the Unit 1, Activity 5, Canada's Role on the Homefront from Unit 1. Unit 1, Activity 5 tasks. There will be a portfolio upload and a discussion post. The topics that we'll be discussing today are gaining a better understanding of historical perspective, propaganda, conscription crisis, conscription, for or against, the changing roles of women, and the Halifax explosion. Our learning goals are learning to analyze propaganda for effectiveness, to think like a historian by using the concept of historical perspective in order to better understand people in the past. Historical thinking concept, historical perspectives. Historical perspective is about trying to understand how people saw the world and what motivated them to act the way they did while living through a historical event. It is not about putting yourself in their shoes and figuring out how you would have felt. How do we do it? As you watch the introductory video on the next slide, take some jot notes on the following. What does it mean to take on a historical perspective? What are the questions we need to ask when looking at the past? What is presentism? How can we avoid it? And what are the problems with only looking at the past from one perspective? Remember, when trying to understand historical perspectives, be sure you are looking at the time period of the people who experienced the event, examining the event from a few different perspectives, and using evidence to support your inferences about people in the past. During this activity, you will investigate historical perspectives on the home front in Canada. While soldiers were fighting on the Western Front, many citizens contributed to the war effort at home in Canada. During this time, disagreements occurred that divided Canadian citizens. We will look at a number of the controversial topics through the lens of historical perspective. 1. Propaganda. 2. The conscription crisis. And 3. The changing roles of women. Remember, sometimes we want to judge people from the past based on our values and attitudes of today. This is called presentism. 1. Propaganda. Take a look at this recruitment poster. What is the message of the poster? Would it convince you to sign up for World War I? Why or why not? This poster was created by the Canadian government during World War I. Based on this poster, what was the government's perspective on the war? What did the government believe men should be doing? Why use propaganda? In order to keep the support of Canadians strong, the government used posters to get their message across to Canadians. Propaganda posters were the main method of mass communication in the time. Propaganda is defined as the spread of ideas or a point of view to support a cause. We have to keep in mind that propaganda is from one perspective and often does not tell the entire truth. It appeals to people's sense of nationalism. Analyzing propaganda. When we examine propaganda, we need to ask the following questions. What are the images and symbols being used in the poster? Why do you think they are using these images? What is the message of the poster? Who is the target audience? What emotion is it appealing to? And is it effective? To get a better understanding of propaganda, listen to these experts. Let's examine some more World War I propaganda together while keeping the questions below in mind. What are the images and symbols being used in the poster? Why do you think they are using these images? What is the message of the poster? Who is the target audience? What emotion is it appealing to? And is it effective? Rationing was used to reduce the shortages of food and supplies for soldiers serving overseas. Victory bonds were sold to raise money to supply our troops. At the end of the war, Canadians could cash in their bonds for a profit. The government introduced new taxes such as income tax, where families paid a temporary tax on their income, and a corporate tax in which businesses paid 4% of their revenues. Women were called to duty on the home front and overseas. At home, they worked in munitions factories, knitted socks for soldiers, sold victory bonds, drove streetcars and buses, farmed, worked in banks and on police forces. They filled the positions of men who were fighting overseas. Enemy aliens. Canada had experienced an influx of immigrants at the turn of the century. When war broke out, people began to fear and question the loyalty of newcomers. Was it to Canada or their country of birth? Some people felt that their safety was threatened at home. Constant fear of being spied on or attacked on Canadian soil started to spread. The government passed the War Measures Act to restrict basic rights during times of emergency. They used this act to intern 8,579 Canadians as enemy aliens and forced others to report to the authorities regularly. Life in these camps was harsh, located in remote areas, and internees were forced to work long hours.